You may have won him, Sarah, but Edward loves me, so much that I'm carrying his child. Beatrice Millington's words, once Sarah's friend, echoed like a cruel sentence on her wedding day. Moments before the honeymoon, Sarah watched her dream collapse. Was it nothing but a poisonous lie? Or was Edward hiding a secret too heavy to forgive? A marriage marked by the shadow of infidelity, and the ghost of a rival, a silence that hurts more than any word, and a woman willing to destroy everything out of envy. And you? Would you trust the man you love amid the silence? Or believe the cruel words of a friend who swears she's telling the truth? Stratford-upon-Avon, England, year 1985. The distant church bell rang 3 times. Its echoes still lingered in the warm air when Sarah pulled her car over to admire the view. From the lookout, she could see the entire village of Priorsford, honey-colored stone houses, sharp rooftops cutting across the blue sky, the main street climbing toward the Bell Inn, all of it glowing under the July sun. For a moment, she stood still, quietly taking it in. But then something caught her eye. On the hillside beyond the village rose Lily Manor. The house looked like a miniature castle, perched on a small slope surrounded by one of the Avon's tributaries. It had a moat, a rustic bridge, and a winding path lined with roses and flowering shrubs. Sarah sighed. Every time she looked at that house, she felt a guilty longing, as if it should be hers. She had an appointment at Lily Manor. She'd known the client for years, and there was no point in arriving early. So she passed the time by photographing the gardens and the house. Then she brushed her hair, tied it back with a ribbon, and checked herself in the car mirror. That was when she saw him, a man rushing down the path from a mansion. Sarah watched, curious. His pace was urgent, far too fast for such a hot afternoon. His brown eyes narrowed in curiosity as he sped past her and climbed into a sports car parked near a convertible Mercedes. The engine roared, and the car shot down the hill, shattering the afternoon calm. Even in that brief moment, Sarah noticed, dark hair wavy, his features taut with restrained anger. What could have made him so furious? She locked her car and began walking up the same path he had just stormed down. At the top, she hesitated. The heavy oak door stood ajar, revealing a dim hallway inside. After a moment, she knocked. Footsteps hurried down the stairs, followed by a sharp, slightly arrogant voice. "I hope you come back to apologize." The door opened wide, and there stood Beatrice Millington. Her silk blouse and trousers clung awkwardly, her golden hair framing a lovely but tear-swollen face. Her blue eyes widened at the sight of the slender figure on her doorstep. "Sarah, oh, heavens! I forgot you were coming." "Of course. Please, come in." She gestured toward the sitting room. "I'll be with you in just a minute." Sarah settled into a rose-colored armchair, gazing through the French windows at the back garden. No roses there. Only a steep lawn sloping down to the Avon's edge. The decor inside was a clash. Pink silk curtains and a plush white carpet against rustic beams and a stone fireplace. But Sarah's curiosity wasn't about the room. She had seen B.A.'s swollen lips, her hurriedly buttoned blouse. Whoever that man had been, he had left in anger. "It's none of my business," Sarah reminded herself, just before we returned with fresh makeup and a wide smile. "Sorry, Sarah. Just a little disagreement before you arrived. I'm so glad you're here." "It's my job," Sarah replied smoothly. "Yes, but you're so efficient, so practical, and far too pretty to be that competent." Sarah smiled politely, hiding her irritation. "You asked for me, B. I'm here. Let's get started." B perched on the arm of a chair, swinging her foot. "I know you adore this dreadful place, which is why you'll sell it quickly." "Your father-in-law spent a fortune restoring it," Sarah protested. "I thought you loved it." "Love it," B scoffed. "I loathe it. Ancient houses are for tourists, not for living. In winter, this place feels like a prison." Sarah bit her tongue. "I'd love to live here," she thought. "And Philip? He wants to leave too." B smirked. "Philip wants whatever I want." They moved through the house together. B complained at every step. The exposed garden, the ruined bridge that couldn't legally be rebuilt, the exhausting climb and rain. Sarah listened, took measurements, wrote notes. By the time they sat for tea, she'd already calculated one of the highest asking prices in the county. Perfect. Bea clapped her hands. Now find me something in Stratford. 2 floors, a pool, a cozy garden. I hate old houses that creak at night. They make me feel unsafe. Bea, Sarah began gently, don't mention any of this when buyers visit. Let's focus on the strengths. Bea pouted, then brightened. Stay for tea, Sarah. Philip's gone racing, and I'm alone. The cook made a marvelous cake. Sarah chuckled and agreed. Later, as they sat on the terrace, Bea leaned closer. By the way, you didn't happen to see anyone when you arrived, did you? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You mean a dark-haired man, in a hurry, looking furious? Yes, I saw him. Bea's face paled, her hand trembling around the teacup. It was Edward Darlington, Bea sighed. Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. The same Edward you were in love with back in school? Bea nodded, embarrassed. The very same. We argued this afternoon. I could tell, Sarah replied dryly. And by the look on your face when I arrived, I'd say it was more than just an argument. By the way, your blouse buttons are still mismatched. Bea quickly fixed them, eyeing her suspiciously. Then, suddenly, she burst out. I have to tell someone, Sarah. I'm terribly confused. Sarah lifted her hand sharply. Wait, Bea. Don't say anything you'll regret later. But I always told you everything in school, Bea whispered, nervously twisting a button. High school confessions are one thing, Sarah said carefully, locking eyes with her. But this is different. You're a society woman now, and I'm just a realtor. I'm here for work. Tears welled in Bea's eyes, sliding down her cheeks. She sobbed like a child. Sarah sighed and handed her a tissue. Please, Bea whimpered. I need to tell someone, and I know you'll be discreet. Sarah glanced at her watch, her tone brisk. All right, Beatrice Millington. If you must vent, speak. But in 20 minutes, I'm leaving. Bea dabbed her eyes, then began. Edward is actually the son of a baron. Sarah frowned. You said Darlington? Didn't a Darlington die in a fire some years ago? Bea nodded. That was Nick, Ed's older brother. Back then, Ed was just a naval lieutenant. My family was nearly bankrupt. Father's business was collapsing, and Philip was available. I knew Ed could rise in his career, but I didn't want to spend my life moving from one base to another. Besides, the Darlingtons have land, not money. I understand, Sarah said quietly. So Philip was there, hopelessly in love with me, with his father's fortune behind him. I felt I had no choice. How could I have known Nick would die, and Ed would inherit everything? Now I'm trapped with Philip. I like him, yes, but it's nothing like what I felt for Ed. I think I get the picture, Sarah interrupted, standing. Dare I ask what today's fight was about? I called Ed, invited him over since Philip was away. We started talking about divorce, and I suggested he spend the night here. He was furious. He said terrible things. You want to divorce Philip, Bea? If you're still in love with Darlington, maybe Philip wouldn't oppose it. Bea shook her head, tears returning. I can't, Sarah. I told you. Father was bankrupt. Philip's father bailed him out, but only on condition that I marry Philip. And she lowered her eyes, ashamed. I do like Philip. I like the comfort he gives me. Did you see my Mercedes outside? Birthday gift. I just don't see why Ed and I couldn't meet from time to time. Sarah stared, stunned. Really? Bea, you want everything at once. Then, remembering she was speaking to a client, she added, but I have to admit, I agree with your ex-boyfriend for refusing. Bea's eyes turned cold. He'll change his mind. I just need to wait. As they walked into the kitchen, loud, insistent knocks echoed from the front door. Wait here, Sarah. I'll see who it is. Bea rushed ahead. Sarah followed moments later, just in time to see a tall, dark-haired man gripping Bea's shoulders, agitated. All right, you win, he muttered. I made it to the bar, had a drink, and decided to accept your invitation, Mrs. Millington. He pulled her close and kissed her fiercely. Sarah froze, embarrassed, then reached for her bag, but it slipped from her hand, the sound breaking the moment. "Sorry, I was just leaving. Thank you for the tea, B." She smiled politely, ignoring the man. "Sarah, wait. Let me introduce you to an old friend. Edward Darlington. Ed, this is Sarah Morton, my school friend." "How do you do?" Sarah said crisply. "Miss Morton," Ed replied stiffly. Sarah's tone stayed neutral. "I'll begin the listing on Monday morning. We'll place the ads, and I'll send you the brochure once we have the photos." "The Lily Manor's for sale?" Ed asked, surprised. "Yes, darling. Be cooed. Philip, and I want something more modern, closer to town. Isn't that better?" "Personally, I love it here," Ed said, his eyes flicking, finally, toward Sarah. "And you're in charge of the sale, Miss Morton?" "Exactly," Sarah confirmed, moving toward the door. "Goodbye, B. Goodbye, Mr. Darlington." She left with a polite smile, resisting the urge to run down the path. No doubt the two of them were eager to continue where they'd left off, driving back toward Stratford. Sarah wondered what it was about B that men found so irresistible. In her 26 years, no one had ever looked at her with such fascination. Still, she wasn't bitter. She imagined that wild passions would only make her clumsy. She knew she was attractive, tall, with thick hair and sun-kissed skin. But her friends often said her independence made her seem less delicate. Many of them were already married, some in messy relationships, while Sarah remained alone. Perhaps, she mused, it was time to adopt a cat. Or two. Crossing the bridge into Stratford-upon-Avon, she parked and walked into her garden, where her two tenants lounged in bikinis. Both sat up as she arrived. One was Henrietta Carr, a blonde with blue eyes and dreams of becoming an actress. The other, Jenny Blair, a fiery redhead with lively brown eyes. She watched Sarah closely as Sarah lay down on the grass. "Tough day, Sarah?" Jenny asked, handing her a glass of lemonade. Sarah drank eagerly. "Thanks, Jenny. I went to a friend's house to take some measurements and notes." Henrietta stretched with a dramatic sigh. "The glamorous Mrs. Millington? How is she?" "The same as always," Sarah said neutrally. "What time is rehearsal, Het?" "I should already be there. I'd better run." "And you, Jenny? When's your next shift?" Sarah asked. "Not until Monday. But after that, it's almost nonstop until the wedding," Jenny groaned. She was a nurse, finishing her specialization. "That's a shame. But soon you'll be on your honeymoon in Spain, and you and Richard will live happily ever after." Jenny narrowed her eyes. "Was that sarcasm, Miss Morton?" "Not at all, dear," Sarah teased lightly. "Are you seeing Richard tonight?" Jenny nodded. "Yes, but we're staying in. We need to save for the trip. You don't mind him spending so much time here, do you?" "Of course not, silly. I'm going out with Neil, and Het's at the theater. So enjoy yourself. Still, I'll miss Het when she leaves at the end of summer. And you too, Jen, when you marry." Sarah sighed. "It's sad to see my tenants go." "You'll find new ones soon enough, Sarah. These rooms are too good to stay empty." "Sometimes I think of selling the house and buying an apartment," Sarah admitted. "But I worry Mother would be hurt. She gave me this house when she married Ian, my stepfather." That night, Sarah felt strangely restless. Even the thought of dinner with Neil, a Greek restaurant, more talk about real estate, felt heavy. "Would you ever move in with your mother and Ian?" Jenny asked. "I'd have to quit my job and start over in Birkenhead. Besides, newlyweds need their space. Mother was widowed for years, since I was 10. Adjusting to life as a professor's wife can't be easy. My presence wouldn't help. Here, at least, I have company, extra income in my beloved Stratford." The weekend passed quickly. Monday morning brought drizzle, gray skies, and melancholy. Sarah stepped into the office, greeted warmly by the receptionist. "Mr. Randall wants to see you as soon as you arrive," Nicole informed her. Sarah knocked on the door labeled J. R. Randall, and entered. He was a slim man in his 40s, intelligent eyes behind thinning hair. He finished his phone call and smiled. "Good morning, Sarah. How was your visit to Lily Manor?" "Very well. The house is in excellent condition for its age." Mr. Millington modernized the utilities, and the garden's stunning. The only real drawback is the lack of a garage. Preservation laws forbid new construction. Do you think that will lower the value much? Not significantly. You priced it high enough. The seller can always come down a bit. I'm glad you asked me to go, even on a Saturday, Sarah replied. You're always reliable, Randall said warmly. Then, leaning forward, actually, I'd like another favor. One you can refuse, of course. What is it? She asked. A friend of mine wants to intern here. I'd like him to shadow you. You're our best agent. Sarah laughed lightly. Careful, or I'll start asking for a raise. You know I mean it. John Humphreys is solid, but you have a certain charm. Sarah rolled her eyes playfully. All right, send him along. Later that morning, immersed in paperwork, she barely noticed the time. At 11, her door opened. She glanced up with a smile, expecting coffee. But it wasn't coffee. John Randall stepped inside, ushering in Edward Darlington. This is Edward Darlington, Sarah, Mr. Randall said with a smile. Ed, this is Sarah Morton, who has kindly agreed to show you the ropes. I'll leave you in her capable hands. Without another word, Sarah's boss left the room, closing the door behind him. That was very kind of you, Miss Morton, Ed said. I should correct something, Sarah replied coolly. I didn't exactly volunteer, as Mr. Randall put it. But of course, I'll do my best to help you. Please have a seat. Darlington sat down, looking slightly out of place in the tiny office. Sarah thought to herself, he didn't carry the stiff formality one might expect from an English aristocrat. I see you're surprised, he said. You didn't expect me to be the one John spoke about, did you? Sarah gave a faint, frosty smile. That's true, but it makes no difference, Mr. Darlington. Even if I had personal feelings on a matter, which I don't, they would never interfere with my work. I follow orders. Always. He let a self-assured smile slip, and Sarah shivered slightly. Choosing to ignore the provocation, she pointed to the stack of papers on her desk and began explaining the work. The office felt even smaller now. His chair was too close to hers, his gaze too steady. She felt uneasy. Relief washed over her when Sally, the receptionist, walked in with a tray of coffee. Sally lingered far longer than necessary, her curiosity about it almost palpable. Thank you, Sally, Sarah said with a smile, moving away to pour herself a cup. The space, however small, gave her a much-needed breath of ease. Ed set his cup down and turned back to her. Before we go on, there's something I'd like to clear up. Last Saturday. It's better forgotten, Sarah cut in firmly. It was unpleasant, but it has nothing to do with me, Mr. Darlington. That's between you and B. His eyes glimmered with a hint of irony. True, Miss Morton, but that wasn't what I meant. You're jumping ahead. Sarah blushed, suddenly self-conscious. Forgive me, she murmured. I only meant, I heard the Millingtons intend to sell the estate. You know someone interested in Lily Manor? Sarah asked. Yes, Ed said simply. Myself. She blinked, surprised. Forgive me. Did you say you're interested? I did. Ed leaned back, crossing his legs, his eyes fixed steadily on her. But I thought, well, you've just inherited a title and estate. I didn't imagine you'd need another home. It's for me personally, he explained matter-of-factly. My father's estate won't pass to me until his death, which I hope is many years away. Until then, I'd rather live on my own. You probably know my brother died in a fire. He knew everything about agriculture. Now it's my turn to learn. Father's health isn't good, and I want to help. I've spent my life traveling the world with the Navy. This is a change. That can't be easy, Mr. Darlington, or should I call you Captain? Sarah asked lightly. Just call me Ed. She shuffled through her papers. And what are your intentions with Lily Manor? There's no need to look at me with suspicion, Miss Morton. I'll be direct. Once the property is officially on the market, I'll offer exactly what Philip Millington asks. Silence lingered for a beat. Does Mrs. Millington know of your interest? Sarah asked carefully. No, Ed replied firmly. And she won't. My father will make the purchase. It will look like a simple expansion of our holdings. That's all B needs to know. I see. Well then, shall we get back to work, Mr. Darlington? Or are you already tired? Ed stood, tall and imposing. Why don't we go to lunch together? No, thank you. I usually have a sandwich alone in the park. But it's pouring outside, he said, pointing to the rain-streaked window. Then I'll eat my sandwich here, Sarah replied calmly. All right, another time, then see you later. She watched him leave, then sank back into her chair, drained. Picking up the phone, she called Randall. How long is Mr. Darlington supposed to stay with me? As long as needed, at least this week. Is that all right? Her boss asked, amused. Oh, absolutely perfect, Mr. Randall, Sarah said dryly, hearing his chuckle through the line. At precisely 2 o'clock, Edward Darlington returned. The work resumed. He was sharp, quick to learn. Still, the afternoon dragged on endlessly. By the end of the day, Sarah said, Tomorrow, I'm scheduled to visit 2 properties. I assume Mr. Randall wants you to come along. He told me to stay by your side all week. For me, that's a reward, Ed said with a smile. I'll drive my car tomorrow. You don't have yours today? He asked. It's pouring. Allow me to take you home. I know you live in Tiddington. Her eyes narrowed. How do you know that? I asked B. Sarah said nothing as they walked to the car. He opened the door for her, then took the wheel. I saw you leaving B.A.'s house in such a hurry on Saturday, Sarah said quietly. I was just arriving. You must have formed a poor impression of me. Best to forget that day. It doesn't matter to me, Mr. Darlington. I only pity Philip. Ed flushed, lips tightening as he focused on the road. Tell me the way, Miss Morton. First right, then 100 meters down. You'll see the house. He stopped at the gate. When she reached the door handle, his hand closed gently around her wrist. Startled, she looked at him. You must think very poorly of me, Miss Morton, Ed said quietly. Sarah shrugged. As I said, your business would be as nothing to do with me. Now, thank you for the ride. Good evening. Please wait. His fingers still held her lightly. Would you believe me if I said I left B.A.'s house right after you and never returned? No, Mr. Darlington, I would not, she replied firmly, pulling her hand free. Good night. She left quickly, but noticed he waited in the car until she was safely inside. The next day dawned bright and clear. Sarah woke with a strange unease, then remembered. Edward Darlington. At least they'd be out of the office. That was some comfort. She arrived early to get ahead on paperwork. At 9, Randall called her in. How did things go with Ed yesterday? Fine, I suppose. Perhaps you should ask him. I did. He said you were very helpful. But I noticed you seemed upset at lunch. Don't you like him, Sarah? You asked me to teach him, Mr. Randall, not to like him as well. Randall smiled, intrigued. Funny, Ed usually has the opposite effect on women. You mean to say you're not impressed by Captain Darlington, even with his Medal of Honor? Sarah's eyes widened. He's a decorated officer? In the Falklands War. But don't mention I told you. He doesn't like to boast. My God, Sarah murmured. Would you rather I assign him to someone else? No, that won't be necessary. Today we'll be out visiting properties. More measuring tape than conversation. One day, Sarah, you'll change your mind about him, Randall teased. She smiled faintly as she returned to her office, but the smile faded when she found Edward Darlington already there, calmly working a crossword puzzle. He stood with ease. Good morning, Miss Morton. Beautiful day, isn't it? Good morning, Captain. Yes, it is. Don't call me Captain, Miss Morton, he said, smiling. All right, Mr. Darlington. Let's review today's schedule. She handed him a set of notes. What happened to the mountain of papers that was here yesterday? Everything looks so neat. I came in early, put things in order. Sarah opened the door, ready to leave, but he gently closed it again. Am I giving you extra work? I always come early in summer. More commitments, more to prepare. Keeps my conscience clear. Your conscience must always be clear, Ed said, in a tone she couldn't quite read, serious or sarcastic. We'll be late if we don't go, mister. Ed, call me Ed. Since we're spending the week together, better drop the formality. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to grow familiar with a man tied to be, but refusing outright seemed rude. She gave him an enigmatic little smile. Fine. Shall we? He insisted they take his car. Sarah didn't argue, staying silent most of the way. It's a rare gift, Ed said suddenly. What is? Silence. Most people can't manage it. Perhaps he meant to ease attention, but the thought would be silenced Sarah even more. She spoke only to give directions to a restored 17th century farmhouse. They were greeted by an elderly couple. Sarah introduced Ed. Darlington? The man asked. Are you Hugh Darlington's son? Ed nodded, smiling, and in that moment his face lit with a charm Sarah hadn't noticed before. She realized then he could be attractive. They inspected the house, measured, photographed. By the time they finished, it was lunch. Where shall we eat? Ed asked on the road. I know a few excellent restaurants nearby. I can't afford restaurants. Let's find a cafe. But I'm inviting, he said smoothly, if you don't mind. No offense, but I'd rather a cafe anyway. His displeasure was obvious, but he parked at the cafe Sarah suggested. They sat, ordered cheese sandwiches and 2 beers. He ate calmly, comfortable with silence. Sarah, however, was uneasy, so much so she lost her appetite. She nursed her beer, unaccustomed to it, while he seemed perfectly at ease. Another? He asked, rising. No, thank you. I'm fine. While Ed stood at the counter, Sarah wished there were music playing. Anything to soften the heavy silence that hung between them. When he returned, he leaned in and asked, Are you always this quiet? Quiet? Didn't you mean boring? No, not at all, he replied firmly. I don't have much to say, but if you want to talk, go ahead. Ed moved to the chair across from her, his gaze steady and intense. I have a story to tell. Do you want to hear it? Please, Mr. Darlington, Sarah answered, straightening in her seat. But the sudden arrival of more diners at the next table cut short that fragile intimacy. Ed rose, held out his hand. Shall we go? Sarah accepted, relieved, though she noticed a flicker of frustration in his eyes. Back on the road, he asked again, It's not yet 2:00. Let's take a walk? Please, there's a woodland just ahead. Sarah hesitated, but eventually agreed. They strolled together until they reached a sunny stream. Sarah sat beneath a tree, tossing pebbles into the water, while Ed leaned against the trunk. May I continue now? He asked. If you insist, she replied, eyes still fixed on the river. How long have you known B? Sarah explained simply that they had gone to school together. Ed pressed further, curious about what we had told her about him. With a touch of irony, Sarah said, Well, I gather that your relationship back then was already quite close. Ed looked uneasy, his hands breaking twigs nervously as he spoke. He confessed he once believed Bea would marry him, but at the time, he was only a penniless Navy lieutenant, while Philip could give her the luxurious life she wanted. Sarah listened quietly until he brought up last Saturday's visit. He admitted Bea had invited him for lunch, but when he arrived, she was alone. After a few drinks, she began to make advances, speaking even of divorce. He'd been furious. Sarah couldn't resist a teasing comment. Unlucky for you, you left that house as if you were fleeing hell. Ed gave a half-smile, then admitted that the alcohol later tempted him to return. But the moment he saw Sarah, he sobered and walked away. Sarah stayed silent for a long moment, then said, Your version doesn't match BEA's. She claims you want her to divorce, but that it was impossible because of the loan Philip's father gave to Mr. Layton. That's a lie, Ed said flatly. My version is the truth. Who do you believe, Sarah? I don't have to believe either of you, she replied firmly. I've known Bea a long time, and I know she exaggerates. I hardly know it all, so I'd rather not judge. Ed said nothing. The silence followed them back to the car. Finally, on the road again, he spoke. For the record, my parents are eager for me to marry and have a family, but they would never accept me marrying someone who had a divorce first. And frankly, neither would I. Sarah shook her head slightly. Poor Bea. She wants to have everything at once. Philip for security and you for excitement. Ed seemed stunned, but then admitted quietly, I did love her once, but I hope that's behind me. I'm not the kind of man who shares a woman's heart with another. Sarah said nothing more. Deep down, she wished she had never stepped into B. Millington's Tangled story, nor crossed paths with Edward Darlington. Sarah felt drained the entire week. The heat lingered, and the atmosphere between her and Ed grew colder by the day. She arrived at the office early every morning, hoping to work in peace before he showed up. Ed seemed regretful about having shared personal confidences, yet offended that Sarah refused to believe he had been honest about Bea. Meanwhile, Sarah grew more worn down with each passing day, losing her appetite, enough to worry her friends Henrietta and Jenny. By Friday, she went in later than usual, feeling much better. Just one more day, she told herself, and she'd be free of Edward Darlington. When she arrived, she found him absorbed in a crossword puzzle. Ed stood the moment he saw her. Good morning. You look wonderful today. Any special reason? No, just looking forward to the weekend, Sarah lied. But I thought you were working Saturday and Sunday, Ed said in surprise. A faint flush touched her cheeks as she shuffled through the morning mail on her desk. Yes, that's true, but the weekend still feels different. It wouldn't have anything to do with finally being rid of me, would it? He teased, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. Sarah didn't look up from the mail. Of course not. Now, shall we get started? We already have someone interested in that farmhouse. Looks like they want to turn it into a guest house. Work soon absorbed them both, until the door opened. Sarah glanced up absent-mindedly, only to see Beatrice Millington, wide-eyed at finding the two of them seated so close. Ed rose, while Sarah offered a polite smile. Hello, Bea. Come in, if you can find space. Bea ignored her, fixing Ed with a sharp, accusatory stare. What on earth are you doing here, Ed? I'm trying to learn a little about property management. Bea. Care to sit? He asked innocently, offering her the chair. With Sarah? Couldn't you find someone more qualified? She shot back, suspicious. I've called you several times. You're never home. Now you know where I've been. Every day. Sit down, Bea. Ed insisted. No, thank you. I'll only be a minute. Sarah, darling, I heard the Wentworths are selling their house near the golf club. Do you know the price? About 3 times the value of the Lily Manor, Sarah replied. Did you receive the brochure I prepared for your house? Yes, dear. I adored the photos you took, and the description was marvelous. Do you think it'll sell quickly? Philip is obsessed with the Wentworths' place. He just loves golf, you know? Bea jingled her gold bracelets, dressed head to toe in hot pink, like some exotic bird. I believe it already has a buyer, Ed said. My father is coming by today to discuss the price. Your father? Bea blinked. But what would he want it for? Well, the land across the river is ours. Buying it would expand the estate, and the house could serve as quarters for a new manager. You wouldn't refuse us, would you, Bea? Oh, of course not. I only want to be rid of it. Doesn't matter who buys. It's a shame you can't, Sarah, since you're so fond of the place. She said it with a touch of irony. Then she clung to Ed's arm. Come have lunch with me. Darling, can the teacher spare you? Take him with my blessing, Sarah replied, relieved. Ed shot her a look of annoyance over B.A.'s golden curls as Bea rested her head on his shoulder. Sarah cheerfully wished them both goodbye and went off for coffee with her colleagues, leaving the office door wide open to clear out the overwhelming cloud of B.A.'s perfume. The others joked about her role as Ed's instructor, and she returned smiling. Her good mood, however, evaporated after lunch when she found a note. Ed had decided not to come back that afternoon. He wrote that he had bothered Miss Morton enough for 1 week and was deeply grateful for all her help. Sarah felt dismissed. So that was it? Bea, supposedly part of his past, had reeled him back in with nothing more than a gesture? In the blink of an eye, Ed had accepted her invitation to lunch, and no doubt to more. Nonsense, Sarah muttered under her breath. Whatever the two of them did was none of her business. Yet the sting of disappointment lingered. She forced herself back into work, already thinking of going home early and meeting Neil. All week she had turned down social events and tennis matches, spending her afternoons stretched out in the garden until dusk. But Friday night, she dressed for theater with Neil to see Henrietta perform. Saturday, there would be a party. She felt lighter, more alive, and Neil was glad to see her that way. Neil Gordon was courteous, kind, with a thick blonde beard, a love of sports, and a steady hand in his work. That night, after the play, he stopped in for a drink at Sarah's. They chatted about the real estate market, but when he brought up Lily Manor, Sarah tried to change the subject. "A little bird told me Edward Darlington has been learning a few tricks from you," Neil said, a hint of challenge in his open, fair face. "He's a very attractive man, isn't he?" Sarah looked genuinely surprised. "No, I don't see him that way. He's a strong, silent type, and I'd never want to find myself in a fight with him." Neil laughed. "Oh, I don't know. You're not exactly fragile yourself. Or are you? Why does everyone think I'm so powerful?" Sarah asked, irritated. "At home, I'm the one changing light bulbs, fixing electrical wires, doing car checks. I even have a friend who's amazed that I know where the carburetor is." All right, Neil grinned. "From now on, I'll treat you with the utmost courtesy." Sarah stood to pour another drink. "Sorry, Neil. I'm just tired. That's all. It's been a hard week, and I wasn't born to be anyone's teacher. I imagine it wasn't easy for Ed Darlington either. Losing his brother must have been a terrible shock." "Yes, it was awful," Neil said, growing serious. "The stables caught fire during the night. The stable boy wasn't there, and by the time help arrived, Nick Darlington had managed to get the horses out, but the smoke overcame him. Poor man was asthmatic. My parents went to the funeral. They said his parents were devastated." "Poor things," Sarah whispered, picturing the scene. Then she changed the subject. "So, what's this party tomorrow?" Neil brightened. "Didn't I tell you? It's a costume ball, a fundraiser for an orphanage. We're supposed to go as 19th century ladies and gentlemen. You know how Madeline Conway loves her eccentric ideas. There'll be dancing in the garden. It's going to be fantastic. You didn't tell me it was a costume party. Where on earth am I supposed to find an outfit by tomorrow?" Neil reassured her, saying Henrietta would certainly be able to find something from the theater. He rose soon after, arranging to pick her up the next night, taking her in his arms. He kissed her cheek just as a car pulled up near the house. "Good night, love," Neil said, leaving just as had arrived. "Hello, Sarah. You look wonderful tonight," Henrietta greeted her, stepping inside. "Were you upset with Mr. Darlington? He doesn't seem like such a bad man." "No, he isn't really," Sarah admitted reluctantly, then quickly changed the subject. "Can you imagine? Tomorrow's party is a costume ball, and Neil only told me now." "Don't worry. I'll find something for you at the theater." The next day, Sarah returned from work early, her arms full of costumes Henrietta had picked out. Though she'd had a long day, she felt strangely energized. With Jenny's help, she began sorting through the clothes, laughing at Het's dramatic take on a Victorian dress. Finally, Sarah settled on a white muslin blouse tied with cords, a corset, a petticoat, and a full red velvet skirt. Later, the two sat in the garden with tea. "Are you working tonight, Jen?" Sarah asked. "Yes, and Richard too. But I'm off Monday and Tuesday night." "Oh, and I almost forgot. Het's spending the night at a friend's place. You'll be alone when you get back from the party." Sarah ironed the clothes, dressed, and examined herself in the mirror. There was nothing extraordinary about the red skirt, which showed her ankles, or the plain blouse. But Henrietta had added a final touch, a cap with curls that blended perfectly with Sarah's own hair. It transformed her completely. She looked younger, less composed. For a moment, she almost took it all off to wear something ordinary instead. She was still debating when the doorbell rang. Embarrassed, she went to open the door for Neil. "Sarah," he whistled, "you look incredible." "Don't you think I look silly, Neil?" "Not at all. You look beautiful." "Thank you. Pour yourself a drink while I finish getting ready." When she came back down, Neil was sipping his glass. He wore a striped suit, not quite 19th century, but stylish enough. Perhaps emboldened by the drink, he suddenly pulled her into his arms. "Seeing you dressed like this makes me wish we weren't going out tonight," he murmured. "I'd rather stay here." Sarah pushed him away, impatient. "If you think I went to all this trouble just to stay home, you're mistaken, Neil. You're never in the mood for romance, Sarah." Neil sighed, grabbing his car keys. "I thought we were just good friends. Neil, I've never suggested otherwise." Neil looked disappointed. "I know, but hope dies last. Well, let's go." The party was lively when they arrived at the Conways. Music flowed across the garden, strung with lights hidden among the trees. The host, dressed as a 19th century farmer, was at the grill. "Perfect, Harry," Neil said, handing him the ticket money, which would benefit the orphanage. Soon Sarah and Neil were swept into a cheerful crowd. Everyone wore some attempt at period clothing, though few were authentic. Sarah received compliment after compliment from the young men, which left her a little unsettled. They lined up to dance with her, pulling her away from Neil. She felt exhilarated, whether from the wine, the costumes, or the warmth of the night. She couldn't tell. She nibbled at the plate Neil brought her, then returned to the dancing, laughing breathlessly as her partner spun her around to the rhythm of a waltz. When she finally stopped, laughing so hard she could barely breathe, Sarah noticed a man watching her from the shadows of a tree, and in an instant, all her joy vanished. The last person she expected to see was Edward Darlington. She turned her back on him, accepted the glass of wine Neil handed her, and drank quickly. "Isn't that your friend Darlington back there?" Neil asked, making a face. "Did you see the outfit he's wearing?" "No, I didn't notice," Sarah replied truthfully, because it hadn't been his clothes that caught her attention, but the intensity of his gaze. "I'm going inside to freshen up a bit. Be right back." She hurried to the restroom, where she tucked her blouse neatly back into her skirt. It had nearly come loose in the dancing, and quickly combed her hair. For a moment, she wished it were time to leave already. But hiding was pointless. With her head held high, she walked into the grand hall again, resigned. There he was, Ed, standing at the door that opened the garden, silent, legs apart, arms crossed firmly over his chest. His costume made the other men look dull in comparison. A leather vest, striped shirt, red scarf at his neck, and tall riding boots. Sarah lost her voice. They stood staring at one another, the silence between them sharper than the laughter, and music drifting in from outside. Finally, to her shock and relief, Ed broke the silence. "You look beautiful," he said simply. And then came a sharp, familiar voice. "Well, well, here you are, Ed. Hiding away?" It was Bea. She appeared on a veranda in a stunning blue satin gown, her hair curled and piled elegantly on her head. "My God, Sarah, how daring you look in that neckline. Not exactly your style. And those curls. She looks wonderful." Ed cut in, his eyes locked on Sarah. Blushing with embarrassment, Sarah brushed past him and forced a sweet smile at Bea. "Is Philip traveling again, Bea?" Bea looked almost offended. "No, he's right outside talking with friends." Relieved, Sarah left him and made her way toward Philip Millington, her shoulders squared. Philip wore an immaculate 1890s outfit, white gloves, and even a monocle, sweating heavily under the summer night. He greeted Sarah courteously and pulled her aside to speak about the Lily's Manor. He mentioned Sir Hugh Darlington's offer and asked if the price wasn't too low. "In my opinion, Philip, you won't get a better offer, and my boss agrees," Sarah assured him. "Then I'll accept your valuation," he said. Bea swept in, slipped her hand into Philip's, and he smiled fondly at her. Ed was nowhere in sight, to Sarah's relief. "Sarah says we should accept Sir Hugh's offer, Bea," Philip explained. Bea looked triumphantly at Sarah. "Fantastic!" she exclaimed, turning to her husband with a girlish air that made Sarah's skin prickle. "And then we can finally buy the Wentworth house, right, darling?" Sarah excused herself, glad when Neil called her to join a loud group at the other end of the garden. They had invented another game to raise funds for the orphanage. The ladies would go inside, drop a piece of jewelry or an accessory into a basket, and then the men would bid on them at auction. The winner would return the item to its owner, earning a kiss as a prize. Neil was chosen as auctioneer. At first, Sarah thought of placing one of her gold hoop earrings in the basket, but there were already plenty. Instead, she decided on a small gold brooch she'd pinned to her blouse, hiding it deep in the pile. Neil was a lively auctioneer. The crowd laughed and cheered as garters, earrings, handkerchiefs, and other trinkets went up for bid. Philip shouted high offers to secure one of BEA's pearl earrings. Sarah clapped and laughed with the rest, but she couldn't help noticing Edward Darlington again, still in his shadowed spot under the tree, refusing to join in the fun. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Neil announced with flair, holding up the small gold brooch, we come to the final item. What will you bid for this jewel? 20 pounds, a calm voice proposed. Neil blinked, startled by the high bid, and turned toward Edward Darlington. He called for another offer, but none came. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Sold to the gentleman on my left. The crowd erupted in cheerful confusion as the men tried to track down the owners of the items they'd won. Sarah was approached by several hopeful young men, each eager to discover if the trinket belonged to her. She waited, torn between dread and anticipation. For the moment, Ed would come forward with the brooch. But when she glanced back at the tree where he had been standing, he was gone. The realization irritated her more than she cared to admit. Nearly an hour later, the party wound down. Neil drove Sarah home. Though the evening had been lively, she felt oddly drained. Her mood darkened. Beat seemed to enjoy herself immensely, dancing with nearly every man there, while Philip simply watched with a proud smile. The sight unsettled Sarah. She longed to advise Philip to be firmer, but she knew it would be useless. When Neil's car pulled up at her gate, the street lay empty and still. She kissed him lightly on the cheek, thanked him for the night, and hurried out before he could suggest extending the evening. "Call me," she said over her shoulder. "Good night." She felt relief hearing the car drive away before she reached the door. But then, surprise, the living room light was on. She was certain she had turned it off before leaving. Unlocking the door, she stepped into the dark hall. Her heart froze when the living room door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a broad-shouldered man. "Don't scream," Edward Darlington said calmly. "It's me." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. Fear clutched her chest, her breath stuck. He moved closer and touched her arms. "Please, don't faint." Fear gave way to indignation. She pulled back, eyes flashing. "I told you I'm not the fainting type, Mr. Darlington. But I have a right to answers. What are you doing in my house at this hour?" Ed raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I frightened you and I apologize. I thought you would hear me coming. The kitchen door was unlocked, so I came in. I only came to return this." From his vest pocket, he drew the small brooch. Sarah stared at it, her heart hammering. She tried to mask it, but his faint smile revealed he noticed. "I knew it was yours by the way you reacted during the auction." Her cheeks flushed with irritation. "Wouldn't it have been awkward if someone had come in with me just now?" "If I'd heard voices, I would have slipped out like a thief," he replied lightly. For a fleeting moment, they both laughed at the absurdity. Nervous, Sarah muttered playfully, "Well, since you paid 20 pounds, you could claim your prize." She closed her eyes and tilted her face upward in mock resignation. But when she opened them, he was only smiling, amused. "I've never had to pay for a kiss, Miss Morton. My bid was for charity, not for a lady's favor." Sarah drew in a steadying breath. "Be that as it may, thank you for the gesture. But now please go." Ed hesitated. Then he stepped closer, taking her hands. "On second thought, I want something in return for those 20 pounds. Before she could protest, he kissed her, firmly, but not harshly. Sarah stood still, unresponsive. He pulled back, his gaze piercing. "It's torture when you don't respond. What were you thinking of?" "I was thinking that after seeing you would be last week, I expected something very different," Sarah said lightly, though her pulse raced. His brow furrowed, wounded. "You're being unfair, Sarah." He leaned in again. This time, his kiss was deeper, his hand sliding to her shoulder, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. She tried to resist, but his strength, his presence, overpowered her. And then, suddenly he let go, breathing hard, as if unsettled himself. "Forgive me," he murmured, and left without looking back. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the ridiculous bonnet with false curls that had fallen to the floor. Confusion swirled inside her, part anger, part emotion. She climbed the stairs, exhausted, and fell into a restless sleep, haunted by shadows and chasing figures. The next morning, she rose early, determined not to let her thoughts be ruled by memories. She dressed lightly and went down to the kitchen. "Sarah," it was Henrietta, standing in the doorway with a suspicious look. "Het, I thought you were staying out last night." Her friend explained she had changed her mind and returned home. Then, with a mischievous smile, she added, "I woke up in the middle of the night and thought I heard voices. I peeked and saw you in quite the scene with your visitor. For a moment, I thought you were in danger." Sarah, startled, burst out laughing. "No, Het, it was just an unexpected moment. Nothing serious." Henrietta's eyes widened. "Well, from what I saw, he looked like quite the man." "Who was he?" Sarah sighed in resignation. "The same one who's been shadowing me at the office all week. Edward Darlington." After that intense night, the girls spent Sunday quietly in the garden, tending to small chores, watering plants, folding laundry. Sarah picked up a book and stretched out on a deck chair, but the words soon blurred. Before long, she drifted off to sleep. Jenny went out to lunch with Richard, and Henrietta left the theater, unwilling to disturb her. Alone, Sarah slept peacefully under the warm sun, unaware of the world. That was how Edward Darlington found her when he approached the house. He stopped, hesitated, then decided to call out. "Miss Morton," he said softly. No response. He bent down and gently tapped the sole of her foot. Sarah murmured something in her sleep, then blinked awake, surprised to see him smiling. "Again?" she asked, stretching. "What do you want this time?" Ed sat down, intrigued by her natural ease. He wore gray trousers and a crisp white shirt, simple, yet elegant in a way that magnified his presence. "I came to apologize for last night." "You already did," Sarah reminded him, eyes half closed. "Yes, but this time I mean it." She stayed still, studying him, waiting. He went on. "I gave into an impulse. I've never cared much for those kind of parties, but my mother organizes a great deal for the orphanage. She insisted I go. She even picked out my clothes. And chose well," Sarah teased, smiling. "You really did look as if you'd stepped out of another century. For me, it was your costume that stood out the most. I'm not used to wearing anything so extravagant. I think we were both out of place." Their eyes met with a brief, knowing spark. "May I ask you something?" Ed said. "That brooch, may I keep it?" "You're joking, Mr. Darlington." "No, I'm serious." His smile was faint but deliberate. "And I'd like one more thing. Call me by my first name." Sarah hesitated, then murmured, "Maybe when the time is right." "As you wish. But since we're here, will you have dinner with me tonight?" Sarah faltered, searching for an excuse. "Well, usually you don't accept invitations from men who behave badly," he finished, with a touch of irony. She sighed. "I share part of the blame. I should have kept quiet. The mistake was mine, walking into your home. But when I saw the door open, I decided to take the risk. You really should be more careful. It could have been someone else." "You're right. When I saw you in the living room, you frightened me half to death. Your silhouette looked menacing." "I was a fool," Ed admitted. "But admit it. You provoked me too." Sarah lowered her eyes. "That's true. Let's forget it." He stayed silent for a moment, then said more quietly, "I only wish it were that easy to forget." Sarah shifted uneasily. The sun burned warmly on her skin, and she feared Ed might notice her discomfort. "So dinner tonight?" he pressed. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not? Because of Neil?" "No, he wouldn't have that right. I was thinking of B." Ed's expression hardened. "I'll be direct. B is a friend, nothing more. What you saw was a mistake, and it won't happen again. I'm not interested in married women. Sarah fixed her gaze on him. Can you deny you still feel something for her? Yes, I cared for Bea once. I admit it, but not anymore. Now we're just friends. And if having dinner with you means giving up every female friendship, then I start to wonder if it's worth it. Sarah arched her brows, lightly mocking. I thought we'd already agreed to use first names. He gave a faint smile, but inclined his head with old-fashioned formality. Until later, Miss Morton. I'm sure we'll meet again. He walked away through the garden, leaving Sarah thoughtful. She shrugged, trying to convince herself she didn't care. But she couldn't deny it. He unsettled her, exhausted her, even, as though every encounter with him was a silent battle. Neil's company seemed so much easier, but also infinitely less intense. Later that evening, when Neil invited her out, Sarah claimed she was tired and went to bed early, though dissatisfaction lingered on her pillow. On Monday, the emptiness grew sharper. After a week of complaining about Ed's presence, she now noticed his absence. She saw him only once, by chance. He greeted her coldly, like a stranger, and walked on. Sarah felt relieved, yet also faintly disappointed. She filled her afternoons with tennis matches alongside Neil and Jim Hayward, a witty young economist, but she never extended the evenings, always pleading fatigue. On Thursday, as Sarah left work, her car wouldn't start. After several failed attempts, she sighed, locked the doors, and turned away, only to feel a light tap on her shoulder. She spun around. Ed was there. Car trouble? He asked, amused. The engine won't catch. He held out his hand. Sarah handed him the keys. He slipped into the driver's seat. There's your problem, he said, pointing at the panel. You left the headlights on. Sarah pressed a hand to her forehead. I drove this morning. I didn't notice in the sunlight. The only solution is to take out the battery and recharge it. I'll bring it back tomorrow. I don't want to trouble you. It's no trouble. In a few minutes, he had the battery out and secured in his own car. But I will charge you for the service. Sarah narrowed her eyes. And what would that charge be? A dinner? She couldn't hold back a smile. How could I refuse? Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. He closed her car, then looked at her warmly. I'll drive you home. Here's your passage translated into fluent, natural U.S. English narration style, for clip-champ voiceover, with the right rhythm and punctuation for a smooth delivery. They drove in silence the whole way. Sarah thanked him politely when they arrived, relieved to finally be home. I'll be here at 7, he said before driving off. That same night, when Sarah mentioned her Friday plans, Neil's jealousy surfaced. So, who outsmarted me? He asked, clearly irritated. Edward Darlington. Neil let out a bitter laugh. Just as I thought. The aristocrat. His reputation isn't exactly flattering. Sarah stood up, offended. It's only dinner, Neil. Nothing more. She ended the conversation firmly, leaving no room for argument. The next morning, Sarah was already at the office when Ed knocked on her door. Good morning. The battery's charged. I'll put it back in her car. I could have done that myself, she said. Of course, but you're busy. When he returned, Sarah had already prepared 2 cups of coffee. He looked surprised, accepted one, and sat down. I think yesterday I must have accidentally hit the headlight switch, she said with a smile. The sun was so bright. What progress? If we're already talking about the weather, it means things are improving, Ed teased, standing up and opening the door. See you tonight. Be ready. Sarah shook her head, amused, and went back to work. She got home early, took a long bath, and chatted with Jenny while getting dressed. Going out with loyal Neil again? Jenny asked, watching her in the mirror. Not tonight. I'm having dinner with Edward Darlington, Sarah replied casually, focused on her makeup. Jenny grinned mischievously. Oh, then tonight promises to be far more exciting than usual. When Ed arrived at 7:30, Sarah could tell from his look that she'd chosen the right dress, a sleeveless knit in beige and brown with a modest V neckline. Simple yet elegant. She greeted him with a smile, one she rarely offered. Ed, dressed conservatively in brown slacks, a beige shirt, and a brown sweater draped over his shoulders, returned the smile. You look very elegant, Miss Morton. Thank you. But this morning I was just Sarah. Then you'll be Sarah tonight as well. I didn't want to presume too much. I'm making an effort to stay in your good graces. Sarah laughed. For the first time in a long while, she felt at ease with him, without that constant edge of apprehension. Dinner was at a rustic country restaurant, where Ed seemed well known to the owner and staff. Sarah ordered cold meats and salad. He did the same. After dessert, they lingered over coffee and brandy. I like a woman who enjoys a good meal, Ed said playfully. A motor needs fuel to run, and you seem to live at full speed. Yet your figure hasn't suffered one bit. Sarah laughed at the comparison. I've always had a healthy appetite. As a child, my mother would call the doctor if I ever refused food. Fortunately, I'm tall, and the calories spread out. How old are you? 32. And you? 26, Sarah answered, distracted, thinking he looked a little older. Ed smiled slyly. I bet you thought I was 42. Not that much, but yes, a little older. Men should take age as it comes, with the marks and all. We don't need tricks to hide it. That's not always what I see, Sarah countered, laughing. On stage and on TV, plenty rely on tricks. Luckily, I'm no actor, he replied, in good humor. The meal flowed lightly until he brushed her hand with his fingertips. So when's the next time? I was just speaking casually, Sarah said, trying to deflect. You don't have to invite me again. Would it be too forward if I asked about tomorrow? Or has Mr. Gordon already claimed the evening? Sarah sighed. Not really. The truth is, my friendship with Neil has gotten complicated. For me, it's always been just that, friendship. But I think he expects more. Maybe that's my fault. Don't blame yourself, Ed said. It's natural. You're attractive, independent, with a solid job in your own house. And who told you that? Sarah raised her eyebrows, surprised. I hate to admit it, but He paused before confessing. To be honest, I wouldn't have dared step into your house if I hadn't thought you were alone. Sarah corrected him, amused. Well, the house wasn't empty. I have 2 tenants. His eyebrows shot up. My God, and they heard? Jenny was on duty, but Het woke up and saw us, let's say, arguing. Arguing, he pressed. Or sharing a kiss? Sarah only shrugged. If that's how you prefer to see it. Ed's laughter rang through the restaurant, drawing curious glances. But he didn't care. So your friend didn't rush to rescue you? I think she was afraid. But remember, I can take care of myself. Not as much as you think, Sarah. His tone turned serious. If someone's intentions were truly bad, there wouldn't be much you could do. Luckily, yours weren't, she said quickly, trying to ease the tension. His gaze lingered on hers, long enough to make her blush. Better we forget about it, Ed. On the way back, their conversation stayed on trivial matters. When they reached her doorstep, Sarah hesitated for a second about inviting him in, but noticed Ed had parked quickly, with no sign of wanting to prolong the night. Thank you for the pleasant evening, she said, ready to step out. He stopped her for a moment. Wait, you still haven't told me where we're going tomorrow. Do we really have to go anywhere? If you like, I could prepare dinner here at home. Sarah regretted the invitation the very moment it left her lips, but it was too late. Ed's satisfied smile gave away his delight. Oh, I'd love that. Thank you. Good night, Sarah. Good night, she answered, her voice nearly lost in the sound of his car driving away. Sarah thought she wouldn't be able to sleep, worried about the dinner invitation, but eventually she fell into a deep slumber. The next morning, when she opened the curtains, the sky was gray and a light drizzle fell. Since she couldn't enjoy the garden, she spent the morning cleaning the house, thinking about what to prepare for dinner. If the weather cleared, she could serve outside. But with the rain, the living room would need a serious touch-up. Henrietta woke up, and the two had breakfast together. Her friend watched her closely. Something on your mind, Sarah? I invited Edward Darlington for dinner tonight, Sarah sighed. I think I drank a bit too much last night, but it was an unexpectedly pleasant evening. Do you have any suggestions for dinner? Sarah was a decent cook. She decided on Spanish-style chicken, simmered with onion, tomato, peppers, garlic, and a touch of spice. She also bought cheese and a fine bottle of wine. At lunch, the girls made do with sandwiches. While Sarah spent the afternoon putting the finishing touches on the house, once Het left for the theater. When Ed arrived, Sarah was sitting on the sofa, watching a movie on TV and sipping a bitter with soda. Everything was ready. She opened the door with a smile that grew wider when she saw him carrying, in one hand, a bottle of wine and in the other, a bouquet of red roses. "Oh, thank you," Sarah said, breathing in the flowers before stepping aside to let him in. "They're from my mother's garden. She grows them herself," Ed explained. Sarah fixed him a gin and tonic, then found a porcelain vase for the roses. She returned to the living room, adjusting the arrangement as she spoke. "Just like last night, you can't overdo it with the drinks. You'll be driving home again." "The success of an evening doesn't depend on alcohol," Ed said, settling comfortably into an armchair, his eyes following her movements. "What matters is the company." "I couldn't agree more." Sarah lifted her glass. "Here's to that." Their conversation stayed light. He asked what she usually did on Saturdays. "It depends. Sometimes I go out for dinner or just a drink. Other times the cinema or the theater." "Always with Neil?" Ed asked after a brief pause. "Yes, but usually in a group with colleagues from work. We end up talking about real estate most of the time. It's a bit of a closed circle." Ed smiled teasingly. "You must have hated me when John Randall asked you to train me." Sarah didn't deny it. "Yes, especially at first. You seemed too serious, as if you were always laughing to yourself." "Why that mask?" He hesitated, staring into his glass. "I've never told this to anyone, but when I was a boy, I was sent away to boarding school. I missed home and my parents so much that the only way I could cope was to hide my feelings behind a hard expression. It was the only way I knew not to cry." Sarah listened carefully, then with sympathy picked up his empty glass. "Poor boy. B and I cried at first too, but it passed. Another drink. I'd better keep my palate sharp. Something from your kitchen smells incredible." Sarah smiled with satisfaction. "Save your judgment for later. I'm not much of a cook." But the dinner was excellent. The Spanish chicken turned out perfectly, paired with the mellow wine Ed had brought. Conversation flowed easily, and Sarah was secretly pleased when he asked for a second helping. Close to midnight, Ed stood to leave, and Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy. She walked with him to the gate. He paused before opening it. "I enjoyed this evening immensely. Even more than yesterday," he said, taking her hand. Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't help but wonder why he always disappeared before midnight. "May I see you again this week?" Ed asked, his eyes fixed on hers. Deliberately, Sarah put on a distant look. "I suppose so, since you keep showing up at the office every day." Ed lifted his other hand, brushing her cheek lightly. "You know very well that's not what I meant." Sarah kept her eyes fixed on his shirt, refusing to answer. He waited a moment, then laughed indulgently. "Shall we go out again on Monday, Miss Morton?" he asked, with exaggerated formality. "Why?" Sarah shot back dryly. "Do I need a reason? I enjoy your company. Isn't that good enough?" She tilted her head, doubtful. "Perhaps. But with you, it feels different." "I don't see how. So Monday, then, yes or no?" "All right," she murmured. "Don't sound too excited about it," he teased with a smile. "I'll come for you at 7:30. Thank you for a wonderful dinner. Good night, Sarah." He pressed her hand lightly, then released it. "Good night," she replied, retreating into the house before he could start the car. There's nothing worse than feeling restless without any real reason, Sarah thought. That week, Ed not only took her out on Monday for drinks, but somehow ended up monopolizing her evenings. Sarah tried to keep her tennis dates on Tuesday and Wednesday, but the afternoons fell heavy. Neil grew tense, almost sharp, clearly resenting being pushed aside. In contrast, Sarah realized just how much he enjoyed Ed's company. He knew how to listen. He showed genuine interest in her childhood and every so often shared his own stories. He avoided speaking of the Falklands battles, preferring to tell amusing tales from his time in the Navy. One night, after dinner out, They were lying on the grass in the garden, watching the first stars appear. "Do you miss it?" Sarah asked softly. Ed sighed, his voice tinged with melancholy. "Not so much now. I've kept myself busy, adjusting to this new life." Sarah studied him, trying to read the sadness in his tone. Maybe it was the loss of his brother. Maybe it was B, despite his denials. She wanted to steer the moment elsewhere. She reached for his glass, but he gently took it back. "That's enough for me, Sarah." He made her sit upright again. "I want to talk to you. I thought we were talking." "I'm trying to change the subject," he said, then continued. "Sarah, are you involved with anyone? I mean in love?" "No," she replied, a little self-conscious. "Have you ever been in love?" "I don't think so. You would know if you had," he said with a quiet laugh. Sarah stiffened. "Why all these questions? Are you trying to judge me?" "Perhaps. I know we met under the worst possible circumstances, and that you saw me as some scoundrel, ready to chase after a married woman at the first chance. There were signs of that, and to be honest, I'm still not entirely convinced otherwise." In the darkness, she couldn't see his face, but she knew her words stung. "Only time can prove my sincerity," he said quietly. "But what I'm trying to say is that things have changed between us. I enjoy being with you, and I believe you enjoy being with me too. You're too honest to pretend otherwise. Am I right?" "Maybe, but there are other men whose company I enjoy as well," she said carefully. "And do any of them want to marry you?" Ed asked, his voice low. Sarah fell silent, unwilling to admit the truth. "So you're waiting for love at first sight? The fairy tale prince?" he pressed. His irony stung. "I've never been waiting for anyone, Ed. I have my work, my friends, my home, my mother who adores me, and my stepfather who always welcomes me. I've never felt I was missing anything. That kind of idealized romance isn't my style." "Then I was right. You'd rather keep life practical, not waste time with love." That was too much. Sarah stood abruptly, irritated. "I'll make some coffee. Do you want some, or is it past your bedtime?" "I'm not finished. And yes, I'll take some coffee. At my age, I needed to stay awake past 11, he teased. In the kitchen, he sat at the table, looking far too large for the small space, watching her intently. "Shall we go to the living room?" he suggested. Sarah walked with dignity, but tension rose when he dimmed the lights, leaving only one lamp on, before sitting close beside her. "So you don't believe in grand passions?" Ed said seriously. "Maybe you're right. I've lived through that once, and it's not the best path. What I mean is, I like you, Sarah, very much. You're beautiful, practical, intelligent, someone who can mean a great deal in my life." Sarah shot him a cold look. "Are you offering me a job?" Ed exhaled, exasperated. "No, I'm asking you to marry me." Silence filled the room. Neither moved. The untouched coffee sat cooling on the table. Sarah, in her simple striped cotton dress, looked younger than ever. She studied him cautiously. In his black trousers and white shirt, Ed looked steady, commanding, like some dark hero standing before her. At last, Ed broke the silence. "It seems the idea doesn't please you." "I don't know how you thought it might," Sarah replied, lifting her chin. "You may see marriage as something practical, but I don't. I could never choose a husband simply because he qualified for the role. I want much more than that. If I said yes, what exactly would you expect from me?" "A child," Ed answered bluntly. "And in return, I'd give you comfort and security." "I see. The way you spoke, I thought you wanted someone to manage your estates." "No, thank you," he said, almost offended. "I only thought your talent for business might give us both a shared interest, something many couples lack." He looked at his untouched coffee cup as if unsure what to do with it. Sarah picked it up and set it on the table. He continued, quietly, "My parents are pressing me to marry, and I thought you were exactly the sort of woman they would have in mind. To me, it seemed logical. I don't understand why you're so upset." "I understand. But the answer is no," Sarah said firmly, though there was sadness in her tone. Ed stood, a frown shadowing his face. Sarah met his hostile gaze with apparent calm, though inside she was trembling. "May I ask why?" he pressed, struggling to stay composed. "Because we don't know each other well enough yet. That can change. I don't believe it would make much difference." Involuntarily, Sarah yawned, more out of nerves and fatigue. Ed spun on his heel. "Good night, Sarah. I'd better leave before I bore you to death." "No, please." She stood and caught his arm. "Let me explain." She smiled, trying to soften the tension. After a moment's hesitation, Ed sat back down. Sarah went on. "I don't want to get married, Ed. At least not now, and not for the reasons you've given, like having children. I enjoy my work. I value my independence. Besides, I don't belong in your world." "That's nonsense," Ed shot back, impatient. "But one day you'll inherit a title. So what? I'll still be the same man, Edward Darlington, ex-naval officer, better prepared for battles than for anything else." He rose and moved toward the door. "Forget it, Sarah. I thought it was a good idea. Too bad you don't agree. Good night." "Don't go like this, Ed," Sarah pleaded, running after him. "Don't be so irrational." They locked eyes in silence until Ed finally let out a reluctant smile, and Sarah returned it. "We're acting like children. Who would want to marry an idiot like me anyway?" "Almost every woman I know," Sarah teased, extending her hand. He took it firmly. "And you, Sarah?" His smile faded, replaced by an intensity that made the air between them hum. He opened his arms. Sarah lowered her eyes, hiding the storm inside her. The embrace came naturally, followed by a kiss long and deep. Sarah felt a soft dizziness, a warmth that wrapped around her whole body as she clung to him tightly. Time seemed suspended until Ed finally lifted his head, his breath uneven. "You see? It isn't just some practical arrangement, is it?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No, but that doesn't mean I've changed my mind," Sarah answered gravely. He smiled indulgently, stepping back and holding out his hand. "Come on, walk me to the gate. Obey your orders." "Yes, sir," she joked. Laughing, they walked together to the gate, where they crossed paths with Henrietta returning from the theater. Sarah introduced them. Het studied Ed with curious eyes under the streetlight before slipping inside. "She's beautiful, clever," Ed said with a smile, "and quick to notice I was tempted to steal a goodnight kiss." And she was right. Sarah pulled away with an ironic smile. "Except I don't agree, Mr. Darlington." "What a shame. Good night, Sarah." He smiled, stepped into his car, and drove off. Henrietta was waiting curiously in the kitchen. "So that's your lord?" "Yes," Sarah laughed. "Benedict Darlington in the flesh. He looks like some Greek athlete, and I like the way he kissed you at the gate. You look like a rose just beginning to bloom. Is it love?" With a theatrical bow, Het disappeared into her room. Sarah tidied the kitchen, then lingered by the garden door, breathing in the scent of damp grass under the stars. Restless, unable to sleep, she heard Henrietta's question echoing in her mind. Ed's proposal had felt cold, but that kiss had left its mark. Maybe it wasn't love yet, but Sarah could no longer say she was immune. On Sunday, she busied herself with housework, yet thoughts of him returned again and again. By Monday noon, she ran into Ed at the office. "Have lunch with me?" he asked with a cheerful smile. "No," Sarah replied curtly, hurrying back to her desk under the curious eyes of the receptionists. Ed followed her calmly, closing the door behind him. He leaned over her desk, his gaze sharp. "Why did you run off like that? It was quite a performance. I don't want to have lunch with you. This is a free country. But why the panic? I have work to do. What's the real problem, Sarah? Afraid of the big bad wolf?" "No, I just think it's better if we don't see each other anymore. You're worried I'll bring up marriage again, aren't you?" Ed asked, his tone dry. "Something like that," Sarah admitted, startled by her own honesty. "I see. And what if I promise never to mention it again? To me, you still belong to BEA's past. No woman likes to feel like the substitute. Then let's talk about it over lunch. I promise. After that, if you want me gone, I'll leave you alone." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. They slipped out discreetly, And once in the car, she noticed the road. "Where are you taking me?" "Home." "To your home? Your parents won't like that. And I'm not dressed for the occasion." Ed smiled. "Relax. My parents are away, and I asked Martha to prepare some sandwiches. I just want you to see the place. And for the record, you look beautiful." She didn't answer. The car rolled through Pryor's Ford until the Darlington gates appeared. Beyond the fields and hills stood the imposing ancestral house. Sarah gazed at it, fascinated. Inside the vast hall, an old fireplace displayed the portrait of a 17th century man. Long dark hair, a gold earring, and an emerald on his finger. The resemblance to Ed was striking. "Is he your relative?" Sarah asked. "Nicholas Darlington, the man who built this house," Ed said with a smile. "He wasn't nearly as refined as he looks. He won everything by winning the heart of a rich merchant's daughter and her dowry." Sarah laughed but couldn't hide her awe. He led her upstairs through the enormous rooms. In one of the suites, a canopy bed stood like something from a museum. "This room is preserved exactly as it was back then," Ed explained. "My mother would never sleep here. She's convinced the canopy would collapse in the middle of the night." Sarah toured several rooms and noticed that the smallest and simplest one was Ed's own. Back downstairs, they passed through the immense hall and into a formal sitting room, filled with brocade sofas, old paintings, and delicate porcelain pieces on small tables. From there, they stepped into a functional dining room lined with silverware on the shelves. A wide doorway led to the library, crammed with books, many in disarray. Finally, they reached a cozy little parlor with floral armchairs, where a small table was set for lunch. "I'll show you the kitchen and the service wing another day," Ed promised, inviting Sarah to sit. They each helped themselves to roast beef sandwiches. "So, what do you think? You mean, did I like your house?" Sarah asked, glancing away. "It's beautiful, but with a place this big, why would you need another just for yourself?" Ed took his time to answer, as if searching for the right words. "My brother Nick was never in good health. I always knew it would fall to me to carry on the family. After his death, that responsibility became urgent. It's time to think about building a home." "A shame the person you once planned it with is already married," Sarah remarked, unable to hold back. Ed only looked at her, serious, without responding. "When I'm married, I'd prefer to have a space that's truly mine, to begin a life together. Don't you agree?" Sarah gestured toward the welcoming little room, with its view of the terrace and gardens. "Then why did you want to show me all this?" "Because I wanted to bring you closer to my world, little by little, since you insist on seeing it so far from yours. First a house, then my parents, and finally what matters most." He looked deep into her eyes. "Would you live at Larkspur Manor with me, even knowing it once belonged to be?" Sarah took a sip of coffee before answering. "To be honest, I love the place. Your parents I haven't met yet, but as for Larkspur, I've always adored that house." She raised her hand, cutting off his hopeful look. "But if you expect me to accept, you can't turn everything into such a practical arrangement. I thought that if you accepted my way of life, in time I could convince you the rest," Ed replied in a carefully controlled tone. "But why me?" Sarah pressed, firmly. "There are so many women of finer birth who would give anything to marry someone like you. Anyone would seem more suitable. I can't explain. I'm only interested in you. Maybe what bothers you is that my proposal came more from reason than from the heart. Am I right?" "I hadn't thought of it that way," Sarah lied, though her eyes betrayed her. Ed stayed silent for a few moments, as if daring her. "When you have time to reflect, you won't doubt the affinity we share." "There won't be any of that, Ed," Sarah said firmly, standing. "And if I stay longer, I'll lose my job. Please, take me back to town." At that moment, the door opened and 2 dogs bounded in, followed by an older couple. Sarah knew instantly they must be Ed's parents. Elegant and lively despite her silver hair, Ed's mother walked over with a warm smile and extended her hand. "You must be Sarah Morton. I'm so pleased to meet you, dear. Ed has told us you've been a great help." "How do you do, Lady Darlington?" Sarah replied, shaking her hand politely. "This is my husband, Hugh," Isabel Darlington added. "Sir Hugh, strikingly similar to his son, inclined his head and shook Sarah's hand, studying her carefully. Frankly, I've never met such a charming real estate agent. No wonder Ed rushes off to Stratford every morning. He chuckled, clapping his son on the shoulder. I hope Martha prepared a fine lunch, Lady Darlington said. We had a drive to Stowe, but we hurried back just to meet you. Sarah's very busy, Ed interjected. She needs to get back to work. Oh, of course, his mother said with understanding. But do come again when you have more time, dear. Sarah thanked him, excused herself, and followed Ed out. The drive back was silent, until they reached the main road. Sarah turned to him, indignant. Did your parents know I'd be here today? Of course they did, he answered naturally. But I also told them I wanted to show you the house alone. And exactly what explanation did you give them? Ed smiled faintly. The truth. I told them I intend to marry you. Ed's persistence about marriage was making Sarah's life increasingly complicated. He followed her around the office so closely that people had started gossiping, and even placing bets. When John Randall told her about it, Sarah felt like screaming. I don't know what Mr. Darlington has in mind, but I can assure you I have no intention of walking down the aisle with him, she told her boss. As you know, he now owns Larkspur Manor. You're right, sir, but I believe I came to your office to discuss business. Sarah's firm tone was enough to stop Randall from pushing the joke further. That night, home alone, Sarah was watching television when the doorbell rang. Opening it, she found Ed on the doorstep, pale, standing before her. I was passing by and thought I'd drop in, he said, without enthusiasm. Sarah motioned him toward the living room and switched off the TV. Coffee, she offered. No, thank you. I just wanted to talk. Ed sat down on the sofa and tried to draw her beside him, taking her hand. Sarah resisted, irritated. This is to stop, Ed. Where's to stop? He asked, feigning innocence. You know very well. I'm tired of the gossip at work. They're even placing bets about our supposed wedding. I want to put an end to it. I haven't said a word to anyone. Ed defended himself. It's just the way I act. That's exactly the problem. You follow me everywhere and it's driving me mad. Ed reached out, gently brushing her hair back. Don't be upset. In 2 days you'll be rid of me, at least at the office. You've already learned enough? Sarah asked in surprise. It's never enough, but it's time I took some of the burden off my father. His health's been fragile since Nick died. He needs me. Relieved she wasn't the cause of Ed's departure, Sarah gave him a sympathetic smile. I'm sorry about your father, but with you gone, the rumors will die down quickly. You could at least say you'll miss me when I'm gone, he murmured bitterly. Sarah stood. I don't know how to pretend, Mr. Darlington. Would you like a beer? I'll take one. She went to the kitchen and came back with a bottle. Sitting cross-legged on the floor in jeans, her hair tied up, she looked simple, yet natural. You look very good like that, Ed remarked. Sarah looked away. These clothes fit my home, but they look out of place in your mansion, just like this moment feels out of place compared to lunch at your house. If I didn't have wealth, would that make a difference? Is it my roots that trouble you? Sarah met his gaze directly. No, one thing has nothing to do with the other. Then why, Sarah? Why won't you marry me? Because you don't love me, and I don't love you either, she thought, shivering. What is it? Ed asked, concerned, kneeling before her and taking her cold hands. You're freezing. Do you want me to light the fire? Sarah forced a smile. It's nothing. He didn't believe her. Standing, he lifted her gently and pulled her onto the sofa, keeping her close. Sarah hesitated, but eventually stayed in his arms, torn inside. Sorry, I think I caught a chill. I was out in the rain at lunch. There's nothing to apologize for. His voice vibrated close to her face. I rarely get this close to you. Why are you always so guarded? Even among friends, a little affection is natural. Sarah pulled away and stood. My friendships are my own business. Another beer? No. Come here, Ed said with a smile. You think I'm a fool? That smile doesn't solve anything. What's wrong with you? One moment you accept me. The next you push me away. Does the thought of marrying me scare you that much? I just think it's better not to keep pushing this, Ed. You know very well that even with love, many marriages fail. Imagine when it all starts like a business deal. You're wrong. His voice was firm. I can give you a home, security, affection, respect. In return, you be my partner, in every sense. You wouldn't need to marry me for that. I could just work for you. You don't understand, Sarah. He locked eyes with her. I want to marry to have a family, children, a life to share. Sarah stayed silent. His voice grew deeper. In the war, I learned the value of life. I remember one dark night in the Falklands, certain I wouldn't survive. But when morning came, I was alive, and I knew what I wanted most, a family. That's what I want now. He drew her close. Stop thinking, Sarah. Just feel. Ed kissed her deeply, and though she resisted at first, Sarah's heart raced. The defenses she had built so carefully seemed to crumble under the force of that moment. So, Sarah, tell me you don't feel anything, Ed challenged, pressing his hand against her chest, sensing the rapid beating of her heart. Then he took her hand and placed it firmly over his own. Can you deny what's between us right now? Staring into his eyes, so close to hers, Sarah shook her head and murmured, No, Ed, I can't. A satisfied smile spread across his lips. He pulled her closer, an arm wrapped firmly around her waist. I'm glad to hear that. Isn't this the perfect foundation for marriage? In my opinion, it takes more than this for a marriage, Sarah answered softly, but with determination. You drive me mad, Sarah. What we feel right now isn't just attraction. There's friendship, respect, affinity. We share interests. We enjoy each other's company. Tell me, what more do you want? Time, Ed. Her calm reason returned to her voice. She stepped back, regaining composure. I'll spend the weekend in Birkenhead with my mother. I need to think on my own. You can't expect me to make a definitive decision just because of one emotional moment. Ed chuckled quietly. But that's already halfway there. When will I have your answer? Will your mother's opinion carry weight? When I return, I'll tell you. I doubt she'll say more than yes or no. She's always expected me to make my own decisions. He rose, preparing to leave. May I at least ask for a goodbye kiss? Because when you return, your answer might be no. And if that's the case, I won't come back to this house. Sarah stood, thoughtful. Do you mean that if I say no, it's all over? Basically, yes. I could never settle for half of you. Taking her shoulders, Ed bent and kissed her with fire. Then he left, leaving her frozen in the middle of the room, pale. The Friday night trip was exhausting, the roads jammed with traffic. By the time Sarah reached her mother's house, she was worn out. She had barely parked when the door opened, and Hannah Craig hurried down the porch steps. Nearly 50, Hannah still looked youthful. A few gray strands streaked her hair, and her brown eyes sparkled as she studied her daughter. Sarah hugged her warmly, then greeted her stepfather, Ian Craig. Hello, Ian. It's about time you visited, Sarah. Your mother misses you when you stay away too long. Ian smiled warmly. And if I know you, you must be hungry. Shall we eat? Despite the warm welcome, Hannah noticed Sarah barely touch her salmon, refused a cheese, and drank several cups of coffee. Ian retired early, and Hannah wasted no time. What's wrong, sweetheart? A man, she asked directly. Sarah sighed, smiling awkwardly. Why does it have to be a man? Mother's instinct. You handle everything with strength, except when your heart is involved. Is it Neil Gordon? No. Sarah lifted her eyes, restless. The problem is different. I'm involved with B. Millington's former boyfriend. The Darlington boy? The one who joined the Navy? Exactly. Sarah explained in broad strokes. Ed's persistence, his marriage proposal, and the pressure for an answer. Hannah listened intently, thoughtful. And what do you feel? She finally asked. Sarah stood, walked to the window, and gazed at the dark garden. I always believed strong emotions only got in the way of life. Now, I'm not so sure. Ed talked about marriage as if it were a contract, a practical arrangement. But I want more. I want surrender. I want true love. And do you believe he still has feeling for Bea? Hannah pressed. That's what torments me. Her mother placed her hands gently on her shoulders and spoke with calm certainty. Then follow your instinct. If you want to marry him, say yes. If you don't, say no. But whatever decision you make it with your heart. Sarah smiled, still undecided but comforted. On Sunday night, when she returned home, she found a note from Het. 2 phone calls from certain someone. Well. Sarah sighed, took a long, relaxing bath, but still thought of Ed. When the phone rang, she answered from her bedroom. Finally, Ed's impatient voice came through. What's your answer? Sarah hesitated. Let's talk tomorrow. Call me at 8. Fine. The line cut off abruptly. Later, brushing her hair, Sarah nearly screamed when she saw Ed standing at the bedroom door. I rang the bell. No one answered. The kitchen door was open again, he explained. After 2 scares in a row. I won't forget to lock it again. You can be sure, Sarah replied, trembling. Ed stepped closer, slowly. I came to hear your answer. Sarah drew in a breath, lifting her chin. Please, Ed, go now. We'll talk tomorrow, as we agreed. He hesitated, displeased, but his expression softened. All right, but first, I want a goodbye kiss. Sarah looked at him, unsettled, yet she closed her eyes and offered her lips, her expression almost resigned. Open your eyes, he ordered. Startled by the commanding tone, Sarah obeyed, parted her lips slightly. Immediately, Ed leaned in, capturing her mouth in a deep kiss as he pulled her close, his hand sliding firmly along her back to the soft fabric of her robe. In an instant, all hostility melted away. A trembling sigh escaped Sarah's lips as his mouth moved with intensity, tracing her neck and brushing her ear with delicate warmth. Will you marry me? Ed whispered, his voice low and heated against her ear. Yes, Sarah answered simply, meeting his gaze with honesty. Ed kissed her again, passionately, his fingers tangled in her hair, holding her with both strength and tenderness. Sarah responded instinctively, wrapping her arms around his shoulders and neck, surrendering to the moment. The robe slipped soundlessly from her shoulders to the floor, though she hardly noticed, lost in the intensity of his embrace. And yet it lasted only moments. Abruptly, Ed pulled back, turning away, his breath ragged as if waging a battle within himself. Stunned, Sarah snatched up the robe, tying it with trembling hands. When he faced her again, his eyes were unsettled, and he gripped her arms. Forgive me. Let's go to the sitting room, please, he said, his voice deep and restrained. Sarah drew a steadying breath. No, Het should be home any moment, and I'm hardly presentable. He attempted a smile, trying to ease the tension. To me, you're perfect. A fool, Sarah corrected firmly, grabbing her hairbrush. Ed leaned in once more, kissing her long and lingeringly before stepping back. I'll leave now, Sarah, for obvious reasons. Tomorrow I'll come at 7. Why? Where are we going? Dinner at my house with my family. Then we'll go to the Lily Manor, so you can tell me how you'd like it decorated. After all, that's where we first met. I'll never forget that day, Sarah said, forcing a smile to cover her nerves. Ed's face grew serious. Forget Bea. She's in the past. What I felt for her was only a phase. You and I, we have something far truer, far deeper. He kissed her several more times, insistently, tenderly, until at last he stepped away and headed for the door. Left alone, Sarah touched her lips, still warm from his kisses. She slipped into her nightgown, tidied her hair, and lay down. It was done. She had given her word. She would keep it. But silently, she admitted to herself that it wasn't enough. What she longed for was romance, tenderness, a man who not only wanted her, not only desired her, but one who was utterly, hopelessly in love. In the weeks that followed, Sarah kept busy with the details of the wedding, leaving her little time or energy for long romantic encounters. The real estate market was hot, rushing before the slowdown expected in winter, and the wedding had been set for the end of October. Sarah could step away from the firm with a clear conscience. Still, Mr. Randall regretted losing his most efficient employee. Plenty of women keep working after marriage, he remarked. I don't see why you need to resign. I will keep working, but somewhere else. Ed needs my help with his state. That marriage of yours sounds like a business contract, he teased, half ironic. He could have simply hired you as his secretary. Sarah's sharp look nearly silenced him. As it happens, he also wants a wife. A lucky man, Randall tried to joke. 2 for the price of 1. When she didn't laugh, he softened his tone. Forgive me, dear. I touched a nerve, didn't I? It doesn't matter. I suppose every bride feels nervous, don't you think? She and Ed met at irregular times. Sometimes at the Lily Manor, but rarely in the evenings, and almost never alone since the house buzzed with workers. The strange mix of camaraderie and formality in Ed's manner left Sarah sometimes uneasy, sometimes relieved. That space allowed her to breathe, to get to know him better. Where before there had been only tension and uncertainty, now there were conversations, even discoveries. Their first trip together was to Birkenhead, to introduce Ed to her parents. The visit was a success. Hannah and Ian welcomed him warmly, and Ed, in turn, appreciated them, much to Sarah's relief. On the first night, over dinner, Hannah remarked, It's a sin for you to turn down pie. Sarah, especially when you don't have to worry about your figure. Ian eats anything he wants and never gains an ounce. I think he has a secret trick. It's called hard work, Ian added with a grin. Then he turned to Ed. I hear you served in the Royal Marines. Must be hard adjusting back to civilian life. Sarah held her breath. Ed usually avoided the subject. To her surprise, he answered naturally. An officer's life has few comforts. At Limestone, we had to march 60 kilometers in 7 hours. I'd rather be dead, Ian exclaimed, horrified. But there were good moments, too. Every Marine must be a skilled skier, and I always loved that. Distracted, Sarah remembered the first time she had seen Ed by moonlight, his broad shoulders, his athletic frame standing out in the shadows. A sudden warmth rushed through her, and she blushed when she realized a memory had carried her away mid-dinner. Hannah's voice pulled her back. Sarah, dear, you're in the clouds. Would you fetch the coffee? Of course, Mother. Sorry. The rest of the weekend went smoothly. On the drive back to Stratford, Ed broke the silence. What was on your mind Friday night when I spoke about my training? I don't remember, Sarah lied. Yes, you do. You blushed when your mother called you. Tell me. It was nothing. I just realized how strong and athletic you are. And you remember that night at the Lily Manor? Sarah hesitated, then answered softly. Yes. And did you like remembering it? Of course I did. But at the time, I felt embarrassed. Then perhaps we shouldn't go back to the Lily Manor under moonlight, Ed suggested gravely. Sarah agreed, though a little hurt that the idea came from him. You're right. We should wait until after the wedding. Entirely? Not even a good night kiss, he pressed. Kisses, yes, but we should avoid being alone too long. You want a family, and I think it would be best if the first child came at the right time, she teased, smiling to ease attention. Ed looked startled. My God, don't tell me. Don't worry. I only mean we should be careful. The mood soured when Sarah mentioned B, and Ed snapped. The tension lasted until they reached her home, where they parted coolly. Later, Sarah felt relieved discussing the future of her own house with Jenny and Henrietta, deciding she would never sell it. That night, the phone rang unexpectedly. Forgive me, Ed said after a pause. Sarah? Yes. Are you still angry with me? No. I thought you were the one who was angry. I was, but it's gone now. Were you in bed? He laughed softly. Don't say bed. I can only picture you lying there in my place. Sarah shivered. He went on. I miss you. Why does the wedding still feel so far away? Those words, heavy with longing and desire, left her restless the entire night. Time moved quickly. Together they prepared the Lily Manor, furnishing it only with essentials. Hannah and Ian gave them an oriental rug. The Darlingtons offered silverware and porcelain. Ed brought his sound system and bought 2 televisions, one for the living room and one for the bedroom. I don't usually watch TV in bed, he said with a half-smile. But on a cold Sunday it might be pleasant. That sounded a little lazy, Sarah teased. I prefer to think of it as cozy, he replied with quiet humor. Later, watching her choose fabrics, Ed couldn't resist. It's hard to be near you and not want to kiss you. Sarah let him come closer, but soon stepped back, fixing her hair. Better to have our coffee in the new kitchen, she said firmly. Amid laughter and confidences, they spent the afternoon together. But when the subject turned back to Ed's past, the air grew heavy. He revealed details about his brother's death, his words marked by deep pain. Sarah listened with compassion, wrapping him in a silent embrace. I don't usually open my heart this way. You must have a gift, he admitted. It's one of my better qualities. Sarah smiled softly. In that moment, tenderness mattered more than any fiery passion. As the wedding drew closer, Sarah discovered that Ed shifted constantly between moments of intensity and unexpected vulnerability. And behind his confident, determined exterior, she sensed a man scarred by loss. A man who saw in her not only desire, but also a safe harbor. That was new for Sarah. She had been expecting a furious appearance from Bea ever since the wedding invitation had been sent. Now she understood the silence. When she finally saw her, days later, it was at a restaurant. Bea didn't notice her, too absorbed in conversation with her companion. He was half hidden by a curtain, but Sarah recognized the broad shoulders, the dark wavy hair. It was Ed. That day, Sarah was supposed to drive to the Cotswolds to view a property, but the owner had canceled. With free time, she thought of having lunch, but after witnessing that scene, she lost her appetite. Instead, she bought a sandwich and walked the park by the river. Then came something new, something bitter. Jealousy. She had never before felt such a corrosive sensation. Leaning against a tree, she let the autumn wind toss her skirt and hair. The chill outside was nothing compared to the cold gnawing inside. Was Ed seeing Bea often? Did they have some sort of arrangement? The week before, when Sarah had traveled with her mother to London to choose her wedding dress, she'd spent a night away. Ed hadn't said a word about how he'd spent that day. Had he gone to the manor with Bea? The suspicion burned through her heart like acid. She tried hard to forget what she had seen. At home, she slipped into the bathtub with a book and a glass of wine, trying to relax before Ed's arrival. She had decided not to ask. She hoped he would bring it up himself, casually, putting her doubts to rest. But he said nothing. He arrived late, had coffee, and began talking about his father's plans to expand the herd and buy a prize bull. Sarah couldn't concentrate. At every pause, she waited for him to mention Bea. He never did. What's wrong, Sarah? Ed asked, noticing her distant expression. Too much work. No, I stayed in town all day. The owner postponed the visit, she replied, her tone neutral. You must be worn out from the office. Come sit with me. You need to relax. The commanding tone annoyed her. Sarah gathered the coffee cups. No, thank you. I'm tired. You'd better go home, Ed. His face closed. Then I shouldn't have come at all. He walked to the door. Maybe tomorrow you'll call me, if you feel like seeing me. Good night, Sarah. Good night. She heard his car drive off quickly. Sarah washed the cups, went to bed, and cried herself into exhaustion. In the morning, calmer, she reflected. Bea was married, and in 3 weeks, she herself would be married. Those were the facts. No use poisoning herself with jealousy. She resolved to apologize to Ed. Jenny's wedding came a week before her own. After the reception, Sarah and Henrietta returned home together, talking. In 7 days, you'll be a married woman too, Ed said. Yes, Sarah answered pensively. You look pale. Pre-wedding nerves. Probably. It's been hectic, and now all that's left is waiting. Sarah explained that Ed had traveled for a meeting and was having his bachelor party early. She felt lost, faced with 2 days without him. Later, alone, she answered the phone. Finally, Ed said, his voice slightly slurred, party noise in the background. Sounds like quite the celebration. It would be better if you were here. What are you doing? Reading. Where? In bed. And it's past midnight, you startle me. That's no way to treat your fiancé, he teased. Sorry. Enjoy the party, Ed. I just wanted to say good night. Good night. Sarah lay back, uneasy. He hadn't spoken a single affectionate word. Ever since seeing him with Bea, she couldn't respond naturally to his gestures, and now she feared their engagement was nothing more than a polite arrangement, too late to turn back. The next day, Sarah had lunch with Ed's parents and was surprised when he appeared at tea time. He walked straight to her, kissed her long, then greeted his parents. Sarah felt her heart warm. "I thought you'd be back tomorrow," Sir Hugh commented. "Changed my mind," Ed answered, holding Sarah by the waist. Lady Darlington served him tea. "Thought you'd left Sarah alone too long?" "Something like that," Ed said, kissing Sarah's hair. The mood stayed light for the rest of the day. Later, when they were alone at home, Ed said, "You sounded nervous on the phone yesterday." "I was just tired. I've been cleaning Jenny and Richard's house. Not exactly the best way to spend a Saturday night." Sarah smiled. Ed held her gently. "I think you just miss me." "Maybe," she murmured. "Then make it up to me." Sarah pulled him by the hands and touched her lips to his. Ed drew her into a deep kiss, then restrained himself, keeping her close against his shoulder in silence. "Something's been bothering you lately, Sarah," he observed. "Have you changed your mind?" Sarah hesitated. She wanted to tell him the truth, that she had seen him with Bea and that jealousy was consuming her, but the words stuck in her throat. After a pause, she only shook her head. "No, I'm just a little worried. It's natural to wonder if we'll truly get along, knowing each other so little. We'll do just fine, don't worry. We're two responsible adults who don't believe life is a fairy tale. I hope we'll have many magical nights like the one at the manor. But I also know moonlight and enchantment are for special occasions. Day-to-day life is made of cold mornings, muddy boots, bills to pay." He turned her face toward his, looking her in the eyes. "Am I giving you confidence or making you even more afraid?" Sarah searched his dark, steady gaze for any hint of guilt or deceit. She found nothing but firmness. "You're right, of course. At our age, reality matters more than romance," she said, still without enthusiasm. Ed frowned, slightly offended. "But I'm not an old man, Sarah. This heart is still full of life. You can believe that." Then he kissed her, a kiss that was not only reassuring but filled with intensity, returned to her the certainty that, at least in the physical bond, their relationship promised everything she could desire. They were married on one of those glorious October days, when the sun shines like summer's final farewell. Sarah resisted her mother's pleas for a long white gown and a traditional veil. Instead, she chose an elegant cream-colored suit with wide silk lapels, topped with a hat whose brim dipped gracefully, adorned with delicate flowers. As she walked down the aisle on Ian's arm, she barely noticed the smiling faces turning toward her. Her gaze was locked on Ed, tall, dark, and motionless at the altar, waiting for her with that unyielding intensity. Her breath faltered when he took her hand and kissed it before they turned to the officiant. That simple gesture carried her through the entire ceremony, echoing in her mind until the moment of congratulations. To her relief, her mother and Isabel Darlington got along perfectly, and the reception unfolded with warmth and laughter. After relatives and friends, Bea and Philip Millington approached. Bea's smile had a metallic edge, her blue eyes sparkling with malice as she kissed Sarah's cheek. "You did it, darling. Philip and I were so surprised by the news. And very happy, of course." "Thank you, Bea. You remember my mother and Ed's parents, don't you?" Sarah replied politely. But Bea's attention had already shifted to Ed, murmuring something that visibly unsettled him. Sarah forced a moment aside. She would not let detain her wedding day. Tonight, she would focus on champagne, on cheerful toasts, on cutting the cake at Ed's side. Later, as the celebration reached its peak, Ed leaned close and whispered, "It's time, Mrs. Darlington. We need to change. In 10 minutes, I'll meet you downstairs." He kissed her quickly and hurried up the stairs. Sarah followed, smiling, until her smile froze. Bea was sitting in her room. "Martha told me which room the bride would be in. I thought we could talk like old times." Bea stretched lazily like a cat before standing. "What a surprise, Bea," Sarah said calmly, removing her hat. "I know this house very well, you see. Tell me, Does Ed still keep that ridiculous little bachelor's room? I wouldn't know. Sarah's voice was dry as she sat at the vanity, wishing we would leave. BEA's smile sharpened. I have to admit, you were quick. I poured my heart out to you at the manor, and when I came back from my trip, you'd already arranged for Ed to marry you. Very clever, dear. Sarah set down her brush and turned. If you got something to say, then say it. Ed is waiting for me. BEA's eyes gleamed like frozen blue lakes. I only want to wish you luck, Mrs. Darlington. You'll need it, because Ed doesn't love you. He's always wanted me, and he always will. You'll be nothing but a convenient facade. Sarah felt the chill cut deep inside, but her face showed nothing. Finished? I need to change. Not quite. Do you want to know why Philip was so happy today? I told him I'm pregnant. Of course. He thinks the child is his. But you and I both know the truth. BEA's cruel smile lingered as she slipped out, closing the door like someone sealing a victory. Sarah remained frozen before the mirror, staring at her pale reflection. She had turned suspicion into poisoned daggers. Her venomous words clawed at Sarah's happiness. Fighting dizziness, she hung her suit with trembling hands, the ground slipping beneath her feet. The door opened. Her mother. Come, darling. Your husband is already asking for you. You'll catch a chill standing there. Sarah jumped to her feet. With shaky fingers, she dressed while Hannah knelt to slip on her shoes, adjusting her coat with trembling emotion. My makeup will run, Hannah murmured, wiping her eyes. Be happy, my love. Remember, there are always two sides to a marriage. Do your part the best you can. Sarah smiled through her unshed tears. I had a good example. Descending the stairs on Ed's arm, she lifted her chin and smiled for cameras. The faces of family, friends, and guests shone with joy and hope. But beyond them, Sarah caught BA's triumphant look, a feline shadow promising to haunt her future. A shiver ran down her spine. Ed squeezed her hand. Cold. No. Sarah shook her head, forcing serenity. But tell me where you're taking me. To a place where we'll have peace. I didn't want to travel far before I had you entirely to myself, Mrs. Darlington. I reserved a room at the Sun Hotel in Witchford, 40 kilometers away. Quiet, discreet, with gardens and a view of the river. It sounds lovely, Sarah replied, swallowing the unease that still burned in her chest. The Sun Hotel looked as though it belonged in an old storybook, with its thatched roof and glowing windows. The bar was alive with cheerful guests, but the room reserved for them was another world. A lit fireplace, oak furniture, a canopy bed, and the silence of the garden just beyond. Sarah entered slowly, feeling the weight of destiny pulling her in opposite directions. The promise of love and the shadow of doubt. Sarah faced him defiantly, her eyes flashing. I don't know if I believed you, Ed, but her words cut me deeply. Ed's breath was heavy as he gripped her shoulders. Then you should know me better than that. I would never choose to live a lie. Sarah looked away, unsettled. She sounded so certain, spoke in a way that made me feel like nothing more than an intruder. Ed loosened his hold and ran a hand through his hair, tried to rein in his anger. She lied. Sarah, I won't deny there was a past between us, but it's over. What I feel now is for you. She hesitated, torn between wanting to believe and the weight of lingering doubt. Then why didn't you tell me you still saw her? I found you both at the restaurant days ago. I was there, Ed. I saw it with my own eyes. For a moment, he was silent, his gaze fixed on her, intense. Yes, I met her, but it was by chance, and it was nothing more than a brief conversation. If I had anything to hide, would I be here, standing before you now, demanding your trust? Sarah stepped back, pressing her hand to her forehead. It's hard. All of this happened so fast. Sometimes I think I don't truly know you. Ed drew closer, calmer now, and took her hands in his. Then give me time. I don't ask you to trust me blindly, only to give me the chance to prove who I am. Marriage is just the beginning, Sarah. We need to learn each other. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held his gaze. I want to believe you, Ed. I really do. But BEA's words keep echoing in my head. He pulled her against him, holding her in a steady embrace. Then let's forget her poison. You are my wife, Sarah. The only one I want by my side is you. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his arms. The sting of doubt remained, but it was laced with an unexpected relief. Perhaps, after all, the shadows of the past could be left behind. Sarah drew a deep breath and asked, her voice barely steady. Ed, she was very convincing, especially when she said she was pregnant and that the child was yours. Is it true? The ice in Ed's eyes flared into fury, then froze into a wall of cold distance. His face hardened, as though he built a barricade against his own emotions. Slowly, he released Sarah's shoulders and turned toward the fire, staring into flames for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was detached, almost glacial. If you think it necessary to ask me that, Sarah, then you've already judged me and condemned me. He poured more champagne, filling her glass and then his own. A toast, my credulous wife, to wedded bliss. Sarah sipped in silence, her heart constricting. His words cut deeper than any outburst could. She realized with dread that she had given B.A.'s poison too much room, letting it stain the very first days of her marriage. The silence between them thickened, unbearable. So what do we do now? Sarah whispered. Ed gave a bitter, almost ironic smile. Do? For such an intelligent woman, that's a curious question. What would you suggest? We could sit here and talk, or we could simply pretend nothing happened. Without waiting for her answer, he took the glass from her hand, drained it, and fixed her with a burning stare. But after all, we are husband and wife. Isn't that what should bind us tonight? He kissed her, the gesture laced with both desire and hurt. Sarah, frightened by his hardness, remained still, too shaken to resist. Yet little by little, his touch softened, his hands turning tender, almost pleading. His eyes searched hers as if begging for an answer, and Sarah, torn between anger and love, found herself unable to resist the pull. Slowly, the bitterness gave way to surrender. The hurt didn't vanish, but the force of the moment swept them both, as if fighting it were impossible. For the first time since the wedding, Sarah felt truly bound to Ed, body and soul entwined in a single current. Later, he pulled away in silence and stepped into the adjoining room. Sarah turned off the light, unable to face her reflection in the mirror, lingering in the bathroom until she found the strength to return. She slipped into her new nightgown and walked slowly toward the bed. But the moment she lay down, Ed's strong arms closed around her. You shouldn't have bothered putting that on, he murmured against her cheek. Sarah tried to protest. I thought you decided to sleep in the other room. You were wrong. I only went to tend the fire in the hearth. This one, his hand pressed gently against his chest, is still burning. His smile carried a mix of provocation and vulnerability. Sarah wanted to resist, but the warmth of his embrace disarmed her. She yielded, letting herself forget, if only for a little while, the sting of B.A.'s words. By dawn, exhausted, Sarah lay in his arms, her body and soul in turmoil. She knew now she loved Ed. There was no denying it. But deep inside, her heart still lay in pieces, torn between the passion that consumed her and the shadows that threatened their future. Sarah held the cup in both hands, savoring the warmth as she sipped her coffee. It was a cold December morning, and she shivered as her eyes wandered over the desolate garden, veiled in heavy fog that crept toward the house, swallowing the river from sight. Pulling the belt of her velvet robe tighter, she went to collect the mail and the morning paper. Only a few business letters for Ed. She placed them neatly on the hall table, then caught her pale reflection in the mirror, shadowed eyes, a face marked by restless nights. Just then, she saw Ed descending the stairs, already dressed to leave. Good morning, she greeted, her voice cool, before turning toward the kitchen. You didn't have to get up, Ed said, following her. I need to visit your parents today, since you and Sir Hugh will be traveling. Want a proper breakfast? Just black coffee. Sarah's tone softened slightly. If you cut back on the whiskey at night, maybe you'd manage more than coffee in the morning. How long will you be in Scotland? I don't know. Depends on Father. I'll call. Ed slipped on his heavy coat, just as a car horn blared outside. Sarah walked him to the door, For a moment, he hesitated. The fog will cover everything. Why don't you stay at Mother's tonight? She invited me, but I'd rather stay here. He looked at her intensely. You won't leave this house, not even for one night. You cling to it as if it were a refuge. Maybe it is. Sarah lifted her chin. I've never needed another. Ed gave a faint, enigmatic smile, leaned in, and kissed her quickly before vanishing into the fog. Sarah closed the door, lost in thought. In a way, she felt almost relieved to be alone. Their marriage had become a performance, affection in public, but cold distance in private. The rift had begun on the honeymoon. By day he was attentive, taking her on drives, showing interest. But at night, silence grew between them, heavy and unexplained. At the manor, Ed had moved into the guest room, and for weeks now Sarah had been sleeping alone in the master bedroom. Sometimes she wondered if Ed even wanted the marriage to last. At first, she had longed desperately to be pregnant. Now she was almost relieved that it hadn't happened. She wanted a child born of love, not of indifference. That morning, her thoughts returned to B.A.'s venomous words. Sarah realized how naive she'd been to let them poison her heart. B had envied her since school, and this was just one more scheme to shatter her peace. When Ed left, Sarah buried herself in work, helping Isabel Darlington at the manor. But by late afternoon, back at the house, she was once again face to face with silence and the storm. She lit the heater, took a hot bath, and even laughed at her reflection in the mirror, wrapped in Ed's oversized robe. A lonely figure, half comic, half tragic. Outside, the wind howled, snow piling fast. She switched on the television, fixed a simple supper, and tried to distract herself. But each creak of the empty house sent her heart racing. Later, a sharp sound at the door made her blood run cold. She stepped into the hall, her footsteps hesitant, and swung the door open, only to find a large dog, soaked and trembling, tail wagging furiously. Sarah exhaled in relief, drying him with towels. The tag on his collar read, Taff. Well then, Taff, she murmured, offering food. Looks like you'll be mine for tonight. The dog's presence warmed the empty house. But the comfort didn't last long. Another noise at the door froze her in place. Taff growled low, sensing her tension. Sarah, Ed's voice cut through the storm. For God's sake, let me in. Relieved, she opened the door. Ed stood there, soaked, exhausted, but with that same unshakable fire in his eyes. And where did this hairy monster come from? He asked, nodding at the dog with a tired smile. Sarah laughed nervously and hurried to fetch towels. Ed dried himself vigorously, his dark hair dripping, his body bare except for a pair of shorts stamped with the Royal Marines insignia. I crossed the river, he said matter-of-factly, heading upstairs for dry clothes. You're insane. Sarah cried, her voice trembling. You could have drowned. Don't worry, I would have made it back anyway. Moments later, he returned, dressed in a thick sweater and military trousers. He found Sarah by the fire, her face glowing in the flickering light. He stepped closer and gently pulled her to her feet. I rushed here to save a lady in distress and find she was already ready for anything. Sarah smiled, surprised by the unexpected tenderness. For the first time in weeks, she felt it. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. A few months after the storm, life at Lily Manor had settled back into rhythm. The snow had given way to spring, and the gardens were blooming once again. Sarah walked slowly down the path lined with freshly planted lilies, remembering how many times she had doubted her own choice. Ed appeared at her side in silence, simply placing his hand over hers. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. Time had softened the sharp edges between them. Both had learned that love is not born ready. It is built, day by day, through mistakes, forgiveness, and sacrifice. When Sarah lifted her eyes to Ed's, she finally saw not just desire or determination, but a steady, quiet affection, the very thing she had longed for. For the first time, she felt he was truly there in body and soul. Sarah, Ed's voice faltered, then grew stronger. Thank you for not giving up on me. She smiled tenderly. I made mistakes too, Ed, but I think now we finally have the chance to begin for real." He kissed her gently, unhurried, sealing a silent promise. Around them, the breeze stirred the white lilies, symbols of purity and renewal. And so, through shadows and storms, a love was born stronger than the past,